Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Pursuit Pod. I'm your host, Calvin Lymper. I'd like to begin today's episode first and foremost with a happy Thanksgiving. I hope everyone gets some good quality time with their family this upcoming weekend and that it's a great holiday for everybody. I wanted to create an early episode this week because I'm going to be going home from college for the weekend, so I didn't know what time I'd have to record the podcast. So with my free day today, I just wanted to make sure that I got out my content to you guys. I know for me, besides my family and friends and loved ones, I am so grateful and thankful for sports and the great opportunity that it brings me and the entertainment that it offers to me. So without further ado, let's start out, as usual, with some Roundball Rock. The Oklahoma City Thunder are off to a very hot start, and they are absolutely embarrassing teams. I saw a Jimmy High Roller video about how Oklahoma City is sitting SGA and J-Dub, and they're still winning by absurd numbers, high win margins each game. And the team is barely at full strength with injuries starting to pile up, even with Isaiah Joe out, and they're still on pace for an expected wins value of 74. For reference, at this point of the season in 2016, the Golden State Warriors had a very correct expected wins number value of 72.9. Obviously, they went 73-9 and were the greatest team in NBA regular season history. But we might be seeing something very similar from the Oklahoma City Thunder this year. SJ's been out most of the fourth quarter this year, but he's still averaging his normal 31 to 32 points per game. Draymond Green said they're a well-oiled machine. And even with that, they own the dysfunctional Clippers first-round pick. I think that there is a very, very good case for Sam Presti being one of the best NBA general managers of all time. You even have guys like AJ Mitchell coming off the bench, and he looks like Dallas Mavericks' Jalen Brunson. And even the second-line Thunder team could very well be a playoff team in itself. I think that the Oklahoma City Thunder have a very, very good case to repeat this year. I think that the Nuggets are just behind them, but the Oklahoma City Thunder are one of the most historically great squads, and they have a very strong case to be a 70-win team this year, and I think that that's not ridiculous to say. Even with the injuries that they're getting, they're still putting up wins. They still only have one loss so far at this point of recording. So the sky's the limit for the Oklahoma City Thunder this year. But if you want to talk about hot teams, I think I want to give a shout out to the Phoenix Suns. I mentioned the previous week that Grayson Allen was alongside Steph Curry as one of the first to reach 53s this season. But recently he's been out with a quad injury, and star Jalen Green has been out for most of the year so far. But the Suns' X Factor so far, the Bear Poker, Dylan Brooks himself, averaging a career high 21 points. And a solid 2.1 steals per game. He's still annoying on defense. And hey, big shout out to my Villanova alumni, Bob Cousy Award winner, Colin Gillespie. He's had a silent 11 points, 5.1 assists year. He's put up 20 against the Timberwolves, along with the game winner in the comeback against them. Hoops Rumors author Arthur Hill stated that Gillespie is seen as the Suns' parallel player to TJ McConnell, who was just an incredible six-man for the Pacers in that finals run last year. And apparently the Suns tried to trade for TJ multiple times last year. As a Nova guy, knowing the way that Gillespie plays, he definitely suits that role. And he could be a huge player for a dark horse run in the playoffs. I think that the Suns, right now, even though they're a little injury-prone, and no one really expected it after getting rid of Durant, getting rid of Beal and that whole team, and they're back exactly where they should be. They're back in the playoffs, in the playoff race, and I think honestly Colin Gillespie should be in Six-Man of the Year talks. Sports Illustrated actually shared the stat that I thought was really interesting, that Gillespie is one of 3 players in NBA history with 150 or more points, 75 or more assists, or 50 or more rebounds in the first 15 games of a season off the bench. I think these numbers are Six-Man of the Year material. I think that we talk here a lot about Jaime Jaquez being the one that's going to run away with that award, but please keep note on Colin Gillespie, not even just because I'm a little biased because I'm a Nova guy, but just keep your eyes peeled on Colin Gillespie and these Phoenix Suns. We talked a little bit about the Los Angeles Clippers and how they're a very dysfunctional team, and let's get right into that. First of all, James Harden is the Clippers right now. He opened Saturday's game against the Hornets with 27 in the first 12 minutes, and he ended with a Clippers record 55 points, 10 threes, 65% field goal percentage, and 7 assists. Ball is a life. That's what he said after the game. And he's been the entirety of the Clippers' identity. Yet, in the fast-paced era, the Clippers opted for an old folks' home instead of going more towards youth around Harden and Kawhi. They just have no working second unit. Norman Powell is now on the Heat. Him being gone from that core is a very big miss for the Clippers. They're sitting in the bottom percentage of both offensive rating and defensive rating, and they do not have a good turnover rating, 16.7%, and they just give up way too many second chance points, and they can't do a dang thing in transition play right now. It's not a good look. As I said before, the Clippers don't even own their first round pick, so the only way that I really see the Clippers heating up this season is if teams begin to tank against them, just to prevent the Thunder from prolonging their dynasty and getting another high round pick. The Clippers are just falling apart. It all started with the aspiration deal in the offseason and how I honestly thought that Kawhi Leonard was going to get suspended. I thought that he was going to be banned from the league. At least his contract was going to be voided. So I think that starting out your offseason, or I guess that rounding out your offseason was already a bad sign for the Clippers, but just not what you want to see from them. I was a fan of the team when they had Paul George and Kawhi, but I mean, really, that Paul George trade, there's already numerous takes talking about how that was maybe the biggest deal in NBA history that really kind of set up the modern NBA and all the modern storylines, but that Paul George deal really changed everything, and the Clippers will never recover from that, and they'll never recover from getting rid of guys like SGA a few years back, and now all they really have is James Harden, and I don't know how strong he is to be able to lead that team all on his back. Obviously, Zubac is playing really well, just like he always has. He's a top 10 center in the league. The Clippers are dead in the water right now. They're very dead in the water right now, and I do not have any faith in the Los Angeles Clippers coming up. But I love seeing Harden get buckets. That's a very good thing to see, and that's something that I love to see always. So, Sacramento Kings are a team that's on paper I'm going to root for night to night. They have a star in Sabonis. He gets a double-double every night. He's a machine. I like guys like DeMar DeRozan and Russell Westbrook, obviously. They have such a fun, loyal fan base. The purple and black are really cool color schemes, and they have the ever-lovable Beam, like the Beam when they were on that crazy run a few years back, but they're still pretty bad this year. It all stems back to De'Aaron Fox's trade. Sports Illustrated, there's an article I read pointing out the trade was ultimately great core players in De'Aaron Fox as well as Kevin Huerter being exchanged for a guy that I'm not really a big fan of in Zach LaVine. I think he's an empty stat sheet stuffer. And then you got Nick Clifford, a few seconds, and then a pick that's going to select a player that's right now in 7th grade, probably in some basketball gym right now. And then you got even 32 games of Jonas Valanciunas, who signed with Denver that next offseason. So this was not a fair trade. This was a blockbuster trade of the Spurs for De'Aaron Fox, but the Kings just have not recovered from this yet. I know it's only been a year, but they just have not found a line, and they're an older team. They're being carried by guys that all across the board, you can even argue. I said about Zach LaVine being an empty stat sheet stuffer. You can even talk about DeMar DeRozan not really being the most efficient player in general. And then Russell Westbrook, how many turnovers does he bring to the team? The Kings even got rid of a culture changer in Mike Brown, one of the most aggressive coaches in the NBA. And he's probably going to potentially go to an NBA Finals with the Knicks this upcoming year. Everybody but Clifford and Keegan Murray on the trade block, apparently. The thing is, Sabonis is a big cap hit with $95 million the next 2 years. Zach LaVine has practically lived on the trade block his whole NBA career. And he proved in Chicago. He's proved it so far right now with the Kings. He's not really a leader role. He doesn't fit into that leader role. Yet, the Clippers look to add to that retirement home for DeRozan. I don't know what the trade market is for any of those players. And unless they're going to trade away a younger player to get some picks or something, what's the point of a rebuild? They have no direction right now, and I don't know exactly what the plan is for them. Again, they're not going to want to get rid of Murray. They're not going to want to get rid of Clifford. They could get rid of Keon Ellis. He's really the only piece that I could see being traded away and getting something pretty decent for them back. But overall, just a very, sticky spot for the Sacramento Kings. Russell Westbrook is still doing his thing, and that's all that makes me happy. So now I want to shift gears a little bit and let's talk some football right now. The Los Angeles Rams, again, Pursuit Pod staple that I always talk about them, but I got to put it out right here. I talked a little bit about it last week, but Matthew Stafford is my pick for NFL MVP. I think it's going to take 6 straight bad games for me to change my mind on that. He had 25 completions, 3 touchdowns against the Buccaneers. He hasn't thrown an interception since week 3. Right now he has a 30-2 touchdown interception ratio. And the 6th time that a QB has had 30-plus pass touchdowns and fewer than 5 interceptions through the first 11 games where we are right now. Tom Brady did in 2007 for an MVP. Rodgers did it 3 times, each for an MVP. Obviously, there was the Patrick Mahomes year in 2020 when he didn't get the award, but Rodgers did it. If he can hold on to this 2 touchdown a game pace, he's going to finish with 42 touchdowns right now. That could be placing him into an exclusive group for QBs that throw 40-plus touchdowns and have 5 or less interceptions. That was 2024 Lamar and 2020 Rodgers. Obviously, Lamar didn't win that MVP last year, but there was a strong case for him winning a second one in a row, but there's the conversation about voter fatigue with him and Josh Allen. So I think Lamar maybe deserved that MVP. That's going to ride weirdly with some people, but people are still talking about Drake May being the heart and soul of the MVP race. But if you're a true stat head, if you really look into the numbers, I think that you could agree that Matt Stafford should be booked for his overdue MVP award by now. He's gone through so much, and right now, 36, 37, whatever age he is, he's up there. Now, QB is a timeless position. If you can get it done at 30 years old, you can get it done at 40. I think Matt Stafford will be in the league for a little bit longer. I don't think he's going to retire anytime soon. Sean McVay even said that he wants him to play for 10 more years. Maybe Matt Stafford is going to have a longevity like Tom Brady. He doesn't win every Super Bowl like Tom Brady did, but he still might win an MVP at this age, and I think the Rams aren't close to even stopping at any time soon. So, talking about some more cool stats and just some history that players are going to be added on to, let's talk about Myles Garrett. Right now, he's far and away the Defensive Player of the Year, in my opinion. He's a force to be reckoned with. 18 sacks in the year so far, and that's insane pace. The record right now is 21.5. Michael Strahan, TJ Watt, obviously, but that means that he only needs 5 more to break that tied record. And that seems like a lot over the next few games, but he had 5 alone against the Patriots in Week 8, 4 in Lamar in Week 11, and even had 3 this past week against the Raiders and Geno Smith. I love record watching in the NFL. I hate it when it's against my team, and I hate it when it's the Cowboys or the Giants, but Myles Garrett is on a tear right now. They take on the 49ers next, and then they have the Titans. Unless he goes crazy, gets those 4 or 5 sacks against the 49ers, I'm sure he's going to get 2 or 3 against them. He will certainly break it against Tennessee, but who really knows? Garrett started out the year very slow with only 4 sacks in the first 6 games, so maybe he ends up hitting a wall and only gets 3 or 4 sacks in the very end up to the season, and he ends up not making the record at all. I think that's very possible. I think we've seen crazier things, and obviously when it comes to records like this, who knows if the pace is obtainable, but right now he has the opportunity to go crazy for the Browns, and that's a team that needs that spark. They're not pushing anywhere. They're going to be out of the playoffs very soon. Shedeur Sanders did fine in his first start, but Myles Garrett is the Cleveland Browns right now. I think that he can get it done, but again, who knows? Maybe he'll hit that wall, like I said. Now I want to talk about another AFC North team with the Baltimore Ravens. They're right now tied for the AFC North crown with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They hold the tiebreaker over them as well. The Ravens began 1-5. The Steelers held 4-1 to the first 5 weeks. Don't look now, AFC North fans. They're now both 6-5. Lamar Jackson's been facing injuries all season. He might be sidelined with a toe injury ahead of the Thanksgiving game against the Bengals, but he's missed practice consistently the past few weeks. He's still expected to play, and this has been an overall admirable year and a very resilient year for Lamar Jackson. He's shown a lot of patience in dealing with his hamstring injury to start out the year, and then recently his knee soreness that he's had in recent weeks. But you talk about injuries with the Ravens, and they're surging right now, but there's an injuries with the Steelers, and they're on the downfall right now. Obviously, Mason Rudolph is back in the starting position for the Pittsburgh Steelers, with Aaron Rodgers fracturing his left wrist, and that has definitely been a big piece of the Steelers' downfall right now. The Ravens haven't exactly faced the hardest schedule ever since that 1-5 start. They've only played against teams with a below 500 record. Obviously, the Bengals are underperforming with Joe Burrow being out with that toe injury, but they started out, they couldn't beat anyone above 500, and they still struggle in the red zone. They still lack execution despite Derrick Henry, who's still setting his records. He's still waking up. He's still one of the best in the league, and he's a timeless running back in an age that you don't really see timeless running backs. If their offense can click with their defense and their special teams who have been performing fine recently, they could use the momentum to end up winning the division and then be a scary dark horse opponent when it comes to playoff time. I talked about last week about how I wasn't high on the Chiefs and Ravens, but the way they're surging, I don't know if they're going to do great in the playoffs if they make it there, but I think that they definitely will be a team that could win the first round. They might upset a team in there. They could upset the best wild card team out there. We talk about sacks. The biggest part of the Ravens being inconsistent right now, despite surging, is because of Lamar Jackson's taking a lot of sacks this year. He has a 25.6% pressure to sack rate. And last year was 11% in his potential MVP year. So right now in the AFC North, it's anyone's division between the Steelers and the Ravens. So it's going to be exciting next few weeks to see what happens with that. I want to end out my football conversation again in the AFC, but this time with the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, they are back in the negative with that Thursday night stunner loss to the Texans. James DeTore of Buffalo Rumblings made an amazing point when it comes to the Bills this season, especially Josh Allen, comparing him to Cam Newton. He said that Buffalo is making the same exact mistake as Carolina did with Cam Newton. They're mistaking a superstar quarterback's individual brilliance with the ability to carry a franchise without enough help. The Bills this year lack a good offensive line. Deion Dawkins has 5 sacks allowed on the season. He's the 63rd best tackle in football right now. Osiris Torrance allowing 22 pressures. Spencer Brown is a consistent liability in pass protection. It's a parallel to Cam Newton, Carolina. And you can even look at the offensive weapons. Obviously, you have James Cook and that great running core, but the Panthers relied so much on Greg Olsen as Cam Newton's only target. And Buffalo right now they need their tight end core to survive. On defense, the Bills are 30th against the run and on pace to generate the fewest turnovers since 2019. I wouldn't say there's a huge panic button being pressed in Buffalo right now, especially, with 7-4. They probably lost the AFC East race, but they're going to be in the playoffs this year. But I'd be wrong if I say that at least I'm not worried in the long term of the Buffalo Bills, especially if they don't win now. Obviously, again, I talked about the Chiefs, how I wasn't really trusting in them. I didn't think that they were going to end up making a splash in the playoffs this year, but they had a comeback win over the Colts, and I've been pretty high on the Colts this year. So if Buffalo can't get it done, now that the Chiefs are looming in the background and once again for them, this was the year for Buffalo, and they might have just lost it. I don't know. It's very, very, very scary times for Buffalo right now. And again, I'm not hitting the huge panic button just yet on them. I don't think you really need to. Josh Allen's still playing out of his mind, but there's just a lot of worry in how the direction the franchise is going for them, especially with the offensive line troubles, with the inconsistent defenses. Now I want to shift gears once again. It's time to talk about some hockey. Huge week in hockey recently. Again, I know it's a shortened one, but I might have some Flyers discussion right after this, but let's start out with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I've heard a lot of conversation about them recently. They're 9-10-3 at the bottom of the Atlantic Division, despite being a consistent playoff team the last decade. Mitch Marner, who left Toronto, is thriving in Vegas. He's a 21-point season so far. The Leafs are just suffering from an older defensive core, and the Toronto Sun said it best when they said that they just look old, big, and slow. Nicholas Roy, when he actually plays, he hasn't done much, and it's led to a lackluster third line that was supposed to be the key to the Leafs' success. There's also mystery injuries with Austin Matthews, Jake McCabe is out, Chris Tanev is out. We're going to get to him in a second. Brandon Carlo. The additions in the offseason for Toronto have just done little to cut some slack for the losses. Not to mention, without Chris Tanev, Toronto's being outscored 44-45 and 41-25 in the 9 losses of those games that he's been out. Craig Berube stated that the team just does not play with any urgency or confidence in the second period. And that's just an inexcusable concept for a veteran team like this. We talk about panic buttons a lot this podcast. This really is just the Negative Nancy podcast that I've made so far, but this is scary times in Toronto. This is a team that is consistently in the playoffs, a team that is consistently, there's always a joke about how they never make it past the first, second round, but this is supposed to be a team that was supposed to, continue surging. They're just going to make it even if they don't have a good team, but they just might not make it. I don't know what the confidence level is in Toronto right now. I don't know where they'll be in a few months coming up. There's definitely a lot of conversation of what's going to happen to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the coming years, especially if the injuries just continue to pile up. I saw some interesting news when I was just searching through NHL news to see if there's any small things that I missed, but the Montreal Canadiens, they are going to take a chance on the forward Alexander Texier on a 1-year deal. The Canadiens, I talked about how they last week began a decline this season with aforementioned injuries to Alex Newhook and Kirby Dach. The Habs need some bolstering in their forward lines. Texier has a chance to flash some promise yet again after a fine 200 games with the Blue Jackets at the end of the 2010s. And he ended up just being a healthy scratch to the Blues, but he still acknowledges a versatile forward who is a top 9 talent for the Canadiens, and he has complementary skill for the team. I think that, now this is just some short segment for the Canadiens, but this is a player that it would be cool to see him get his game back. And it's really just a no-risk, pretty decent reward kind of move, and I think that it's admirable that they're going to take the chance on him and that we're going to see him back in the league. Now, again, I talk about Edmonton a lot, and this is going to be the first podcast that I'll mention Connor Bedard, now looking through everything, or Celebrini, but Edmonton's always going to get mentioned, and the Stuart Skinner era in Edmonton, it really should be over sooner than later. He has a 3 goals against average, .882 save percentage, and 0.2 goals saved above expected on the year so far. Again, when he's playing out of his mind, but he's shown far too much inconsistency, especially in recent playoff runs, to be able to bring Edmonton above the curve in a league that defense really does win championships. Jesse Corville-Lynch of the Hockey Writer stated that the other Oilers goalie, Calvin Pickard, has shown the Oilers are not only losing due to their goalie performances, because Pickard played amazing against the Lightning, but the Oilers were still very outplayed. Stuart Skinner is ultimately one of the most confusing players in the NHL. They recently had a 6-5 win over the Panthers, and he actually outplayed Bobrovsky, which is, that was the storyline of the last 2 Stanley Cup finals. Bobrovsky allowed 4 goals on .765 save percentage, and Skinner even stopped 10 goals in that final period. Overall, the Oilers just need to find maybe not a better goalie, because Skinner, again, when he's on top of his game, he's on top of his game. He's one of the best in the league, but just one that is just far more consistent. And that's something that I really think has lost the Oilers the Stanley Cup finals in the last few years. The name of the game was always just, did Stuart Skinner do good? Did Bobrovsky outplay him? If they can get a matchup just like that one a few nights ago, where he actually ended up outplaying Bobrovsky, Oilers can win those Stanley Cups. When he's not, McDavid and Draisaitl can only do so much to lead that team on their back. Now, there's no Celebrini, no Bedard talk, no Carlson talk, but let's talk about Matthew Schaefer. I've kind of neglected him as I've been doing this podcast, but the Islanders are turning heads. 13-8-2 start on the year, led mainly by Schaefer. He had an overtime goal earlier in the year, around the time that I started making these podcasts, and he was the youngest NHL player to score an overtime goal at 18 years and 70 days old. That beat out Crosby for that, who used to have that record for an overtime goal, being the youngest player. But he has 15 points in the year, and he's a +8 on the ice. Now, he's 5th on the Islanders shot blocks list right now, but he's on pace for 60 points, and this would be the 11th time that a rookie defenseman ever reached that milestone. Right now, he's probably far and away the favorite for the Calder Trophy, but Bo Horvat still controls his line with 25 points through 23 games. Matthew Barzal also helping out, leading the second line with 17 points. Ilya Sorkin on fire right now, .905 save percentage, adding a lot of stability to the defense of the team. They might burn out, just like we've been seeing with the Utah Mammoth, who we'll be talking about in a minute. Right now, the Islanders have pretty solid wins with the Oilers, Caps, Devils, Golden Knights, but they're holding strong in their division as well, going 4-1-1 in the last few divisional matchups. I think that it definitely is one of the bigger conversations in the league right now, and it's always a conversation around these kind of younger teams, or teams that are being led by these very young players. Are the Islanders legit? And I think that's something that I'm going to watch personally in the next few weeks in the NHL. But we just talked about the Utah Mammoth. I want to finish out my Stick on the Ice segment with some Utah Mammoth talk. This is very recent story. Logan Cooley led the way for the Mammoth last night in a 5-1 victory over Vegas. 4 goals. First 4-goal performance of the year. Obviously, he had 5 points and an assist for Dylan Gunther. Despite their downfall beginning earlier than expected, the Mammoth are 8-3 when Cooley scores, and 11-5 when he and Gunther are on the same line this year. The Mammoth have just struggled in November. They're 4-5-3 this month after, a very blossoming start that saw them alongside the Ducks and the Blackhawks for a very early, surprising surge of a young team. But this win with Cooley and Gunther just going guns a-blazing is a flashback to not-so-distant days of the Utah Mammoth outchancing their opponents on a 5-on-5, outchancing their opponents on even strength lines, and they just hold steady in the Central Division. 3 points above the Jets, but still just below the Wild and Stars. They were on pace to be a wild card team after that hot start, but there's just been a lot of question marks on how they're going to be able to keep things up and what they can really do with that team. But Logan Cooley, Clayton Keller, Gunther, if they just keep firing as they've been doing, I think that they can kind of waddle their way up to that playoff spot that they're really hoping for. Now I want to go into the Philadelphia talk of the podcast here with the Phanatic. Starting out, obviously, segueing from the hockey talk to the Philadelphia Flyers. Very up and down short week for me. Flyers right now have 25 points in the year. They're at the bottom, or at least towards the bottom of a very close Metro Division. Top of the division has 30 points. Right now they have 25. And it started out great with a fine game against the Blues, a great win over the Devils, and then just last night with an offensive dud against the Lightning. But the Flyers made some franchise history against the Devils, starting out the little stretch with the fastest goal outburst in franchise history. 3 goals in 26 seconds. Mitch Kov began turning the stove a little bit with a breakaway goal in the first, assisted by Coots, before Tyson Forrester found a beauty of a backhand pass soon thereafter from Noah Cates, and then another one from Cates just soon thereafter after the faceoff. The Flyers ended up delivering on a shakeup of the Forrester-Cates Brink line. They brought in TK, who has just had no issue connecting with his teammates for assists, and that was a very fun win. That was a very fun box score watch if you're just looking at the play-by-play, just to see those goals pile up one after another. Next game, despite missing Victor Hedman and Braden Point, Lightning stunned the up-and-down Flyers from the very beginning. They dropped the Flyers to a 8-5-2 record when they allowed their opponent to score first, but at least we got a fun fight between Delorier and Curtis Douglas, but it came out of a game that was just a sad loss and a momentum killer when you really put it bluntly. But the good news is the pairing of Emile Andre and Jamie Drysdale definitely looks promising for the Bullies. With them on the ice against the Devils, Andre showed a 63.53 expected goals for percentage, and Drysdale had 57%. Drysdale continues to move the puck nicely and with intent. I've spoken about him in podcasts before, but Andre is also stepping up on the offensive end. It's a continuation of a hidden yet great year for the defensemen of this team, and especially for Drysdale so far. Again, not a lot of news for the Flyers, but I really want to highlight another young player that, just like I highlighted with Martone and Bump in the last few weeks, I want to talk about Denver Barkey. He's undersized, but he's been hot with 5 goals in his last 6 games for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. 13 points in the year, not so many behind the surging Alex Bump, who I mentioned could be an aid for the underperforming lines last week. Barkey's undersized. He's a prospect that should be higher and more prevalent for Flyers fans and their radar. His game can certainly translate to the majors, despite it being a premature move to call him up anytime soon just with Bump. Flyers' future is bright. Right now it's up and down. Who knows if we're really going to end up making the playoffs as much as we want to. And, it's a really confusing time in Philadelphia on the hockey side with maybe they should go all in into the lottery sweepstakes. Maybe they should go all in off Zegras' success and make it to the playoffs. If we can be consistent one way or another, then we decide our fate. But right now the future's bright with Philly, no matter what happens with, obviously, Denver Barkey, who I just mentioned, Alex Bump, and then, of course, Porter Martone is coming up pretty soon. Right now he's in college. Now, the biggest story probably in Philadelphia sports recently, unfortunately, would be, that terrible division loss to the Dallas Cowboys. I don't really have many thoughts that haven't been said by every facet of Philly media this week. First half was Super Bowl level. I watched it. Jalen Hurts was doing great. I was like, hey, there we go. He began the game with one of his better, more accurate days. And I literally heard the commentator say that his deep ball is wildly underrated. People don't really talk about his deep ball. I even texted my group chat saying, no, I can't believe it. They're talking good about Jalen Hurts' accuracy. Like, after all the memes, after all the conversations about how Jalen Hurts is maybe the one that shouldn't be leading this team, he's Super Bowl MVP, and he's started out the year pretty accurate. He started the game pretty accurate. And I saw this 94.1 clip where they stated that Dak Prescott would be leading this Eagles team better than Jalen Hurts is, and I think I'm not even going to get into that. That is blasphemy. That is just absolutely ridiculous, and I don't even want to touch on that subject, but there just needs to be some sort of identity for this offense. A big part of it is the lack of true design runs. Obviously, Kevin Patullo is not really being able to fix his own game. Nick Foles probably said it best when he said that he's a one-dimensional coordinator, and he just simply lacked the magic that is needed for a championship-winning play call sheet. But besides just the offensive firepower, especially all the A.J. Brown drama, even though he started out the game really well, he had himself a really good game, and Devontae Smith had a few good catches in that first half, but the offensive line just looks distraught, and they look terrible. It's annoying to see one of the consistently best offensive lines in the league collapse all of a sudden this year. There's multiple penalties. With the rest of the team, the Eagles had 14 penalties in the game versus the Cowboys. Nick Sirianni needs to find the Eagles' discipline, and there's a lot of talks about how maybe moving on from Nick Sirianni might be the best decision. Again, I think it's just Philly media overreacting to things, but Nick Sirianni needs to find our discipline, and he just cannot allow these penalties to kill us in these tight games anymore. But I'm going to ride with Sirianni because we won the Super Bowl. We've been to 2 Super Bowls with him, and until we have a bad season where we just look terrible, like how the Ravens started out this year, and they just, let's say that we had a Ravens-esque year, and then we just keep falling apart from there, then that's when I'll be on the fire Sirianni train. But hey, despite the loss, the Eagles still hold 2.5 game lead on the NFC East. Obviously, the Rams win over the Buccaneers, even though I had a high praise for them. It was no help for our number 1 seed odds, but we have an easier schedule ahead of us. We play the Bears, Chargers upcoming, and I don't really see us having another huge upset loss like that again, unless things really are that bad, as the media's been saying. But I think we're going to lose against the Bills later on, but we're still 8-3. We're not, 4-7. We're not 3-8. I haven't lost faith in the season. We have it much better than most of the teams in the league. I just hope that all the conversations right now, I just hope that doesn't completely fall apart when it comes playoff time like 2023. There's been a lot of comparisons to the 2023 year with this Eagles team, but that team was 10-1. This team is 8-3. I think that this is a better showing of what the Eagles are and their identity, despite the 2023 team just getting off to that amazing start and then just never finding it back again. But I think that we're going to go farther in the playoffs than that team. I think that we can repeat, but there definitely needs to be some big changes upcoming for the Philadelphia Eagles. So along with the Flyers kind of being up and down and just kind of mid right now, after all the hype that I began the 76ers year off with, they're also just up and down. Win and loss, back-to-back nights. The injuries are beginning to pile up now alongside every other NBA team with the fast pace of play. We talked about Steve Kerr mentioned that being a reason why there's so many injuries, and there needs to be the load management. But Embiid's just going to be out all the time. Kelly Oubre's now out. VJ Edgecombe is starting to be out a little bit. Jared McCain is back, and despite the 15-point outing against the Heat, where he kind of got back into his form a little bit, he just simply hasn't looked like the funny, flashy player from last year, and it's really troubling when 76ers begin to lack real bench guard star power, besides, Quentin Grimes, who was, again, I think he was the best return from the offseason. I talked about that last week, but Jared McCain stepping up like he did against the Heat, even though we lost, would be massive for the 76ers. So I hope that he's really the X factor right now with all the injuries that we have. I think that we just need another guard that's going to reliably be able to help out Maxey with his 40-point outings, 50-point outings. This can't be the Maxey show any longer. I don't want this team to end up like the Clippers, where it's just James Harden scoring 50 a night and the rest of the team really not doing anything. I need the team to have consistency all around. I said before, I don't want us to be the cardiac Sixers every night. I want us to be the Sixers that start in the first half and just go all the way from there. But 76ers bench tallied 44 points against the Heat. And this is definitely a big improvement and a bright side on the 76ers over the past years. And I'm not going to count them out completely yet just because of this, Trent and Watford, I mentioned Quentin Grimes, are amazing pieces off the bench. And hopefully they can just continue to lay the pressure off Tyrese Maxey in the starting core. Not to mention Jabari Walker, Dominic Barlow, two-way guys that are just some of our biggest strengths coming off the bench. But there's still a lot of questions in the air regarding the second half collapse that the 76ers show. And it's been slowly better. More consistent finish to each game will definitely be a massive win for the Sixers and make them a stronger team to compete for the playoffs. But there's the third quarter collapses are still happening. And yeah, there's fourth quarter comebacks, but there's still inconsistency at timeouts with our play calling. And that is just a coaching issue. I think there's still a question mark on Nick Nurse's actual offensive scheme for the 76ers. Right now, he's, to put it simply, a Diet Thibodeau. He has, a gritty emphasis on defense, but really aggressive in his minutes and his lineups. And I just do not know if he is a long-term answer for the 76ers. And I don't want to get on the fire Nick Nurse train, but I kind of mentioned how I'm not the happiest with him. I wasn't really thrilled with his hire when he came in a few years back, but I think there's just a lot of question marks about, is Nick Nurse a long-term answer for this team? And if so, the improvements need to come now. The improvements need to come quickly, and they need to come sooner than later. We need Nick Nurse to begin to spark up the 76ers a little bit because we need the run now. We cannot be stuck at 500 or else we're not going to make the playoffs. Maybe we'll be a play-in team, but the play-in shouldn't even exist. We should just be in that top six. And I think this roster is definitely talented, especially with Andre Drummond playing the way that he's playing. With Dembona before he's been injured, being a good backup big. This is a team that we just need to find our spark. Paul George came back. He's doing fine. He's doing serviceable things, but there's still a question on if we should trade him. There are just some moves to be made for the 76ers, just like the Eagles. Let's see him now. Let's see him sooner than later. Let's get out of this rut. The 76ers are a much better team than they're showing. So let's change it. Let's change it sooner than later. It's just not good. And I'm tired of just seeing this team go huge 2 wins, 3 big losses, 2 huge wins, 3 big losses. It's kind of damaging to me, and it's very just up and down, and I don't really appreciate it. Now I would like to enter into the Clemson Corner. Really just a fantastic weekend for Clemson. Obviously, they won 45-10 over Furman in such a fun night in Death Valley. Another thing I'm very grateful for is my opportunity. I worked in the press box for the Tigers newspaper, and that was just an absolute dream come true. I nearly had tears when I came out to that row where all the media members were working, and I saw my name as one of the seats. I was just, dang. I really made it. I know it's the first game. I know it's against Furman. It's not really that big of a game anyway, but it was a really cool experience, and I'm just so grateful for it. And it took up all my day, and I'm just so happy for it. But it was amazing being able to go to the post-game pressers, seeing Cade Klubnik, talking to Antonio Williams, Wade Wooders came out, even Chris Denson, and then even just being in that room with Dabo addressing all the media. I didn't ask any questions because guys were going rapid fire, then all of a sudden we ran out of time. But really just being there, it's kind of cliche, but there was just kind of the aura to it that Dabo presented in his post-game presser, and it kind of gave me some chills. And when I walked to Chipotle downtown after everything was all said and done, I was just like, dang, we really came this far, man, and there's just so much upcoming for me, and I'm just so excited for it. But getting back to the Clemson game, I can talk all day about that, but massive game from the defense, massive beatdown led by Wade Wooders, on senior day, and the secondary, man, Kylan Griffin, Will Hett, Khalil Barnes having huge plays and numbers on the stat sheet. The defense made Furman quarterback Trey Hedden look aimless out there. He was only kept to 88 yards in the first half, and Clemson led 31-3 at the very end of that 2 quarters. Antonio Williams did his best Randy Moss impression. 2 receptions, 2 touchdowns, just such a fun showing from him on senior day, but Cade Klubnik even looked like the Heisman potential player that he was meant to be this year. And then he was pulled in the early second quarter and had his arms raised and he was crying, and the entirety of Death Valley was cheering like crazy. I'm not the biggest fan of Klubnik, but Dabo stated in the postgame presser that he is all in all the time, and he really was the heart of this Clemson team this year. Obviously, I'm not the biggest fan of him. I don't really think that I bought into the Heisman potential at the very beginning of the year, but he ended up being a top 4 Clemson quarterback of all time by the numbers, and if he gets 338 plus over South Carolina in the Palmetto Bowl, he could be a career 10,000-yard passer for Clemson, and he will be the 4th Clemson quarterback to do so if he does that. So I root for it. But the quarterback conversation for next year for Clemson has been shaken up. My player of the game against Furman, despite only playing 2 drives at the very end of the 4th quarter, was Chris Denson. The 4th stringer came out swinging when Vizina and Perriman just looked spotty. They didn't really look like they knew what they were doing against Furman. Denson just grabbed first downs with his legs like it was nothing. He ran a 50-yarder. It might have been the highlight of the whole entire game, in all honesty. He looked like a Jalen Hurts prototype, accurate throws and confidence in his own running game. Obviously, he's a thinner guy. His frame kind of scares me. He's very undersized, and I think that's a reason why he might not be the QB1 for next season, and that he might not get a lot of success in college football. But I think that he should be in consideration for QB1 next year. I'm not sold on Vizina. I'm not sold on Perriman, even though Dabo clearly is, based on that presser that he had with us. Clemson media legend Faxon Childress is the credit for this title, but I really do expect Baby Vic to make this Clemson offseason quite interesting. Really the biggest takeaway from this weekend for the Tigers football team is I just give huge props to Coach Dabo Swinney. His no quitting me quote just stands true. He leads the 2025 team to be the 10th Clemson team in program history to finish the season 500 or better after starting with 1 or fewer wins in the first 4 games. They're going to be guaranteed a bowl game, and at least this disaster of a season wasn't for nothing, and they're still in the positive. So obviously we need offensive coordinator changes, we need coaching staff overhaul, and a lot of things to consider in the transfer portal. Maybe a lot of guys leaving, a lot of recruits leaving, but Dabo's the man, and Clemson's still going to be dancing the bowl this year. So not the way we wanted it preseason, but I'll take it. I'll definitely take it. Now, shifting gears a little bit to Clemson basketball, they narrowly claimed the Charleston Classic, and they begin with a really, really, really impressive 6-1 on the season. Clemson played a tough game against West Virginia, one of the most efficient defenses in the country, by the way. Carter Welling, 13 second-half points, playing hero ball for the Tigers in that win. He also got 3 straight shots at the very end and 2 free throws to seal the deal. RJ Godfrey led the way with 14 points, starting out perfect in shooting against the Mountaineers. Butta Johnson, hidden presence for the team with 11 points, showed to be extremely clutch for the Tigers in the chip against Georgia. Dylan Hunter has improved since the Georgetown game. I said I wasn't high on him last week, but him being consistent will be huge for the Tigers coming up when they face tougher opponents. The team has amazing potential. Again, the Georgetown loss, I said, is going to end up as being a good loss because that's a better roster, Fred Cooley. That's just, Georgetown was nearly ranked. They had a few more votes, the AP poll this week, but the team is just not backing down in physical games, and they have immense depth. I said, every game you hear about a new player popping out. This week it's Butta Johnson. The team just encapsulate the Clemson grit that the football team was lacking this year. And Brad Burnell we trust, really, honestly. We got 6 votes for the top 25 poll this week. But the biggest tests of the season are coming up. The next few games are number 8, Alabama, number 9, BYU. I think that we have a big shot to be ranked again. I think that it's all going to come down to how we perform against those highly ranked teams, especially Alabama's going crazy. BYU has AJ Devonta. This is really going to be a true showing of what the Tigers have. So I want to finish out the Clemson Corner segment with the biggest disappointment in this past weekend. Again, Negative Nancy podcast, but Clemson United, the ball was entirely in Western Michigan's defensive zone, and we just ended up reenacting the Pitt loss and allowed an early Broncos goal, and we just shot ourselves in the foot the rest of the game. Clemson United lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament at historic Riggs Field in one of the most disappointing soccer games I've ever seen firsthand. We dominate the shots category. but it just did not tell the whole picture at all. Too much hesitancy on open shots. A lot of Ben Simmons-esque action where you could have a clear path to the goal and then players would just try to dish it out to others in the field and end up resulting in turnovers. And it was just a very frustrating game in all facets. This was a team that was once ranked number 2 this year, and they ended up losing to one of the statistically lowest ranked teams in college soccer. I'm not surprised at the loss. I stated I don't think that their resume was impressive enough to make me think that they were going to walk their way to the Natty and win a championship, but I just hope that Ransford doesn't leave this offseason or go to the pros because the team is going to need him. I still trust in Mike Noonan. He is a battle-tested coach. He's a coach that knows how to fix things, but this was just a year that you really desired more from the Clemson Tigers, and you really desired more from just their defensive unit, and they just didn't perform. And again, it was the pit loss all over again. Early lead from the other team, and that's just how you lose. I will say that is the one thing that kind of bogged down the weekend for me. After amazing performances by basketball, amazing performances by football, and a lot of hope for the future, but you just need Clemson United, probably our most consistent sport in the past few years in soccer, to perform, and they just didn't. So not a good showing from them. I want to finish out this week's podcast, of course, with a check-in on my fantasy team this week. And man, what a good week from the boys. Again, I said last week that we were playing the first eliminated team out of the playoffs, so it was supposed to be a pretty easy win. One of the historically worst teams and statistically worst teams in fantasy history, maybe ever, was my opponent. I don't really feel like showing his team. I don't like showing the other teams because it's just showing my team. But Caleb Williams, Bears are still on a roll. I probably should have had a segment about them on 4th and 4, but he got 21 points. Just he's been playing pretty good. He's been playing under the radar. Travis Etienne has really been the X factor for the St. Browns go marching in. 20.6 points. Kyron didn't really do his thing. And Justin Jefferson, I don't even want to talk about the Vikings. I never want to talk about them again until they start winning. But Dalton Schultz put up 1.8. David Montgomery put up 6.7. Seahawks kind of underperformed with their defense and special teams against the Tennessee Titans. What the heck? What's going on there? But I will say the kicker Little actually did do a lot in the absence of Cameron Dicker. So I appreciate him kind of showing out in that overtime win against the Cardinals and going perfect on his kicks. And so this was just a routine win for me. Not a lot of thoughts, but we're now 6-6. We're back on track. And right now, with our points forwarded, we are now 6th in the playoff seeding. And we have a big week against someone who is, I believe he is 5 and... No. I believe we are going against someone next week that is 5-7 or 6-6, but I forget. But it's going to be a big win. If we win that game, then we're in the playoffs. So I'm really hoping and praying that this next week will be the week that Justin Jefferson goes off, because I don't know if we're going to make it all the way to the championship. I don't think my team is consistent enough to do that, but we definitely can. I just want to be in the playoffs because I have the roster for it, and to miss the playoffs with this roster would just be an absolute shame. But Keenan Allen was out, Cameron Dicker was out, and I still had Kenneth Gainwell on the bench. I have to start considering starting him, especially if Jalen Warren is still kind of shaky. So a lot of things to be considered in this next week for the St. Browns go marching in, but we're on a good path. My buddy, who's the commissioner, is going to be in the playoffs for the first time this year. And yeah, it's been like 5 years and he hasn't made the playoffs. So really happy for him. Happy that all my friends, my good friends in the league, are making the playoffs, hopefully. So we'll see what happens. But we're cruising. St. Browns go marching in are cruising right now. We just need a win this next week, and then we're in. So let's just keep it moving. Thank you all for watching again to the Pursuit Pod. Again, happy Thanksgiving. I know this is an early episode in the week, but really fun week in sports. A lot of, negative conversations going into Thanksgiving, but happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And per usual, go Eagles, go Birds, go Flyers, go Phils, go Sixers, and go Tigers. What a good week. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and I'll see you all later.